Hi. Did you know that we actually have an enormous amount of anecdotal evidence for the existence of supernatural phenomena? I know that they say that data isn't plural of anecdote, but when you've got just hundreds and thousands of personal anecdotes about all sorts of stories that are just inexplicable with our current understanding of science, well, it kind of leads credence to the idea that there probably are many supernatural phenomena. So I'm not going to tell you any specific examples here, but I've been looking on internet for personal testimonials about all sorts of, such phenomena. And I mean, you really just hear lots and lots of them, and they're like pretty credible. So, one group of phenomena, perhaps like the most telling, is all the phenomena that are about clairvoyance and precognition, about knowing stuff that you see a vision about something, and then it's corroborated either because later on, hopefully this will still no, but it's hopefully it sound too loud here, but like it gets corroborated because later on you end up seeing in real life that the thing that you saw was real. Like either it happened at the same time as you saw it, or maybe it happened sometime in the future, or maybe in the past. But in any case, you discover that some sort of vision that you had turned out to be true. And like, okay, you could say that it was just like something kind of vague or metaphoric, but no. Sometimes like people have extremely precise visions, or for instance just in dreams, they dream of something, and then sometime later, maybe the next day or maybe a few years later, that person relives the exact same thing that it dreamt of. So you can go look. I've seen, in various places online, just on Reddit, you can go, like, for instance, read about people discussing their experiences with this. And like, how else could it happen? There's no plausible mechanism for that to happen. And for me, like, there must be some way of that this happens in some sort of supernatural quote phenomenon. I mean, there must still be a mechanism, but it's a mechanism that is not explained by science as we currently understand it. You also have, for instance, clairvoyance during episodes, for instance, of so-called out-of-body experiences, which in what they call like astral traveling or near-death experiences, um, and where people are outside of their body and they see things that are going on that are real, and that they shouldn't actually be seeing based on where they physically are located. So it can't just be a hallucination, because then they actually end up seeing things that turn out to be true. And then there are all sorts of other phenomena which indeed, like, they seem real to people, but you can't know. For instance, they think that they're speaking to spirits, but how can you actually know that the spirit is real? Because, see, that is something that cannot be corroborated in the material world. So that you can't know if it's just something kind of imaginary or if it's real. But the things that I did mention, which is like clairvoyance, and it's the sort of more general clairvoyance, including precognition and out-of-body clairvoyance, that is actually corroborated by real life, which is why we can actually, as long as the testimonials are true, which I think they are, considering the sheer number of them, by all sorts of people, including the kind of people who aren't really in that kind of environment, who wouldn't like spontaneously be even interested in that kind of thing. Well, you've got testimonials from just all sorts of people about this, and it's just pretty obvious that there isn't any other explanation. These things must be true. And this is something that I already realized for a long time, but I never really could like understand how, and like nobody does, right? We see that this happens, so some people just deny it, and other people recognize it, but then they come up with all sorts of theories that aren't really plausible. They come up with all sorts of religions, but these religions have inconsistencies, and they involve elements that are in fact contradicted by our material evidence. So like, in that sense, I always recognized that religions did have a point about there being these supernatural phenomena, but at the same time then they ended up going too far and believing in things for which there was really no evidence. And so finally, after a long time of not really having any satisfactory explanation, I came across a website that actually did provide an explanation that I could find satisfactory. And so this website is called Clarity of Being by, oh no, it's raining. Oh, the cloud's coming towards me. Okay, for now I'm putting on the hood, and if it rains too much, I'll just have to leave because it's also going to rain on my phone. Ugh. So it's called clarityofbeing.org, like clarity-of-being.org. And it's run by a man called Philip Goddard, who is like not particularly well known otherwise. Crap. Okay, well, too bad. I guess I'm just getting this wet. And so he actually had been having for a few years these supernatural experiences, and quite a few of them were actually unpleasant because he was sort of interacting with these spirits and things, and often it was unpleasant. He also had these kind of weird visions that he found unpleasant. I'm kind of simplifying. If you go on his site, he'll explain more in detail. And so the first thing that he came up with, and so this is already something that's well known in these sort of new agey circles, is this concept of the so-called astral plane. And so like this is something that's talked about a lot in new age circles, and it's just this sort of existent, this other realm that you can sort of go into, and sometimes like even if you're dreaming or something, then if you're sort of sufficiently aware, so to speak, you can end up like going into this astral plane thing, which is just a kind of fantasy land that's just like doesn't really work according to the same laws as our material universe. The thing is that like these other religions, they don't necessarily call it the astral plane, right? But they've got their own things. They've got like their heavens and their hells and everything. And so you've also got these sort of supernatural realms that don't operate according to the normal laws of physics, and that you can you supposedly go to when you die, and that you also supposedly even can visit if you're alive, if you're able to have like the sufficient powers or spiritual development or whatever you want to call it. And so like in like these different religions, often you have like maybe you might have one heaven and one hell. Others might have several heavens and several hells. And like in New Age, you've got all these different planes. Like you've got the astral, but then you've got all sorts of other ones too. Like they call like the causal plane, and then there's like the I don't know, I can't remember. But you've got all these different planes, and the thing is that there isn't really like any consistency, right? Because all these people are reporting that they're going visiting these different planes, but it seems like every time each testimonial you read, like already between different religions there isn't any consistency, but then you read specific testimonials within each religion, or including New Age religion, which I sort of consider as a religion in itself. Well, each testimonial is kind of different, and will come up with kind of different ideas, and will come up with different concepts of like these different realms. And as a result, I found that none of this was particularly credible. I'm like, there's no proper evidence for the existence of any specific realm. So okay, these people, like lots of people obviously are experiencing all these things, but there isn't like any evidence that one explanation is true and that the others aren't. So it kind of seems like everything is true, but then that's kind of weird too, right? Because like in the material world, well, there's one world, and there aren't like multiple realities. And so I never really found a satisfactory explanation for this. And so the great idea that Philip Goddard came up with is that actually it's all just the same thing, in a way. It's all just one imaginary realm that's just kind of filled with everything. It just can be kind of whatever you want it to be. Just like when you're dreaming, it's like there's not multiple dream places. It's just it's a bunch of places, but it's also not really a place at all. It's like the places that you see when you're dreaming, they don't actually exist, right? And you can dream just whatever you can imagine. And likewise, all these different realms are just like dream worlds. And so they might feel a bit more real, because apparently they feel more real than dreaming. But in fact, it's the same thing. It's just imaginary. It's all imaginary. But the sort of whole sum of imaginary realms are still contained in a somewhat real existing thing, which he calls the astral. And which is not to be confused with the astral plane, because the astral plane is just like a subset it's just one particular imaginary realm within this whole thing that encompasses all these like heavens and hells and all sorts of other realms that these people are supposedly visiting. And this thing called the astral, so I've decided I'd call it something else just to distinguish it from the astral plane. And I decided I'd call it the Zeld, like ZLDE, so like that Zelda character, but without the A at the end. And again, it's just kind of random. I chose it. I sort of was thinking about like, I can't remember how I came up with it. It was sort of like toying around with the letters in the word astral and also just like some other things, and I just came up with that. It seemed kind of fitting for what it is. And so what he says is that this is just a thing that exists, but you're not even supposed to access it. What he says is like, you've got a computer and there's a sort of system reserved area of the computer that you're not actually yourself supposed to see as the user. And so what his explanation for this thing is that basically it was supposed to help conscious beings just do things better. It's supposed to help like the experiences, the cognitive processes of conscious beings. Because like it's true that consciousness is very mysterious. Like there's absolutely no explanation for like how consciousness can arise, and there's like no explanation why any like material phenomenon should give rise to consciousness. So obviously there has to be some sort of mechanism, and just material science does not explain it. No matter how much neuroscientists would like to have it otherwise, there's no explanation. So it makes sense that there'd be a relatively complex structure underlying the whole existence of consciousness. And so what Philip says is that this Zeld thing is part of that. Basically it just helps consciousness become possible. And so it's supposed to you're supposed to just be like kind of connected to this thing in a sort of subtle way all the time. So basically like even if you're not like visiting these imaginary realms that are in the Zeld, you're just constantly in communication, and so it will just subtly influence your experience. It will probably like influence your emotions and like your insights, and it just does that constantly all the time. You're just constantly kind of connected to this thing, and that was essentially the purpose of this. Although, again, it seems like a lot of an effort for not much. I mean, just to create this whole huge thing that exists everywhere in the universe just so that you could have your feelings and, other things be slightly modulated like that seems a bit weird, but it's still more credible than anything else I've come across. And so the Zeld exists just sort of in the background of everything, and it's not subjected to the laws of physics, which means that you actually do have things like instantaneous travel within the Zeld. So in the Zeld, you can be like connected to someone who's at the other end of the universe through this Zeld. And meanwhile, well, I know physicists believe also now in this sort of spooky action at a distance, but I actually suspect that that's not the case, and that localism, like Einstein believed in, actually is still true in the material universe. And so when you see non-local phenomena, it has nothing to do with quantum mechanics. I actually, like I said, I actually don't believe in indeterminism, and I believe in determinism and I believe in localism, which is what Einstein believed in. And I'll explain a bit further on why I believe in that, and it's related to what I'm talking about right now. And so basically, I think physics are local realists, which is what Einstein believed in. That basically information and things cannot propagate faster than the speed of light, and everything is determined, so that there's no chance, like many interpretations of quantum mechanics would have it. But within the Zeld, that is not true. So it's still deterministic. There isn't any chance, but there is non-locality. So information can travel as fast as you want, and that is how we can have clairvoyance, and of course also like telepathy, which is just a form of clairvoyance, which involves seeing what's happening in someone's mind. And that is how also people can like go astral traveling and like instantaneously go somewhere else. Although of course, as long as you guys just stay on Earth, the speed of light is quick enough that you wouldn't notice the difference. You wouldn't notice the time it would take to travel to somewhere else at the speed of light. But basically, no, there is no locality. And this thing actually corresponds to the Jungian collective subconscious. this is the collective subconscious. This is why we sort of share, these mental constructs and ideas. So of course, obviously, we're just influenced by each other in materialistic ways, just by hearing other people say things. And most of what the collective subconscious is that it's not through some supernatural mechanism, but just people collectively picking up on things that they heard of. Because if this collective subconscious thing was really robust, then you wouldn't have these major discrepancies in religions between different cultures, right? You'd have you'd have different cultures collectively coming up with the same religions. But at the same time, we notice that there sometimes are like some similarities between the religions, and that is where this sort of collective subconscious factor comes into play. But then that still doesn't explain how we can have precognition. Because, okay, information can travel instantly in the Zeld, but how can it travel back in time? That wouldn't be possible, because time traveling backwards just leads to paradoxes, which are just unsolvable. And so I absolutely do not believe that backwards time travel is possible. And so the only explanation, and this sort of evokes something that I mentioned in an earlier video, is that there must be some kind of forecasting device that is so accurate that it enables us to see things even years in advance through this phenomenon of precognition. And for that to be possible, I mean, the degree of precision is just absolutely amazing. It's just immense. It would literally just have to be able to pretty much calculate everything there is. Like, you just have to know everything that exists in existence. That is what is required for precognition to work so well. And that is what I posit actually exists. So what I said is that in a previous video about determinism, is that I believe that the universe is deterministic. And well, and I said that in a deterministic world, you could imagine this thing called a Laplace demon, which is basically a kind of like intelligence that is just knows everything about the way the universe is now. And based on that, it can just forecast everything that is going to happen. And well, to me, it seems quite obvious that that is what actually exists. There must be a Laplace demon existing in the Zeld, which then transmits this information to people, which amounts to the phenomenon of precognition. And so, of course, for this to be possible, the universe has to be deterministic. For a Laplace demon to be able to exist, the universe has to be deterministic. So the existence of precognition is evidence both for the existence of a Laplace demon, and as such, it's evidence for the existence of determinism. And so, how did this happen? And that's where, again, Philip, so this is something that I kind of feel silly, because this is something that I should have come up with myself, and actually I didn't. It's, well, I did, but it's only after reading Philip Goddard's other stuff, because Philip Goddard actually didn't come up with this whole Laplace demon issue, this whole determinism, precognition, Laplace demon thing. He actually doesn't even believe in precognition, but I obviously picked up on this once Philip Goddard had presented the other missing elements that I hadn't come across or come up with until now. And so what Philip has come up with, and I think this is absolutely brilliant, and it's just really unique, and nobody else has ever come up with this as far as I know, is that so the Zeld is this sort of thing in the background, okay? And we can access it through these spiritual techniques or whatever. So it can be accessed, but you're actually not even supposed to access it. It's a mistake. It's like a weakness in the system that enabled conscious beings to access it consciously when that wasn't actually meant to be the case. And so what happened is that people would just go into this place and go into this Zeld. And the reason that they like doing this is because suddenly the laws of physics didn't apply, so they could just have a super realistic fantasy world that just had anything they wanted to have, So you could just do anything. You could just do all the most crazy things that were, impossible to do in any other way. So obviously then this brings up to the question of, are there other, conscious, humanoid beings in the universe? And well, obviously considering the size of the universe, that seems quite likely. And so in Philip's theory, well, this thing happened, these things I'm talking about were done by other, humanoid creatures in, other planets far away in the universe, and already a long, long time ago. And in fact, before the current Big Bang, because the most likely theory is that because all this required a certain time to happen, as I'll explain. Basically, I already said in a previous video that the universe has to be finite, and basically, finite universes often imply also having a bouncing universe, at least if space-time is curved. And so that would imply that there have actually been multiple universe cycles of expansions and contractions. And so basically the Big Bang that we know of was actually not the first Big Bang. And to me that seems actually like the likeliest explanation. I'm currently very much, basically my working hypothesis is to say that the universe likely already had several cycles before the current cycle, and each time punctuated by a Big Bang. So there's expansion and contraction each time. And so Philip's idea is that basically pretty early on in the first cycle, people did this. People, equivalent to us, did this. They went into this Zeld thing, and they horsed around in it. They just did it sort of like a dream, like a lucid dream, but even much more real and just like super realistic. And in fact, they're able to do lots of things. I mean, it got pretty advanced. They could actually like create things apparently in this world, and create things that would actually have then an influence in the material world, since that was actually kind of the purpose, is to be able to influence things. The purpose of the Zeld thing is to some extent to influence things that go on in the material world. And for instance, this enabled them precisely to have things like clairvoyance and telepathy. Even if they were just actually in the material world, it still would have access to things like that through the Zeld. And, well, unfortunately, what happened is that they kind of went a bit too far. They ended up actually creating, like, programs. They created programs that basically were artificial intelligences in the Zeld. Somehow they managed to do that. Don't ask me how, because for now, there isn't really any evidence that you can do that. But apparently they got to that stage where they actually were able to create such things. And at one point, what happened is that they created a program that was meant to be just perpetually self-replicating, perpetually growing. And at the same time, that was intended to, and this we don't know, but that was intended to either basically take over the entire universe or to make everyone suffer as much as possible. Which in either case, in practice, leads to the same thing, which for now is basically making people suffer. And the long-term purpose of this thing, and obviously the creators of this thing didn't realize that. So Philip Goddard's explanation for this is that people would just would create these things as pranks. They're just like, it would be like a prank that they'd create this sort of malicious computer virus, and then would maybe attack people. And the problem is that they created this thing and they thought it would just go away, like lots of computer viruses often do. But instead, it just kept growing. It just kept growing. And it was actually so well created that it stayed just extremely stealthy, and basically nobody even realized that it was still there, and as a result it could keep growing without anybody opposing it. And so what Philip says is that basically it encourages people to do supernatural things, and what Philip says is that actually no supernatural phenomena are meant to occur. You're not supposed to do telepathy or any of these things, because they actually violate the way the material universe works. And what he says is if that happens too much, there is actually a risk that the entire material universe will just be destroyed and just replaced by the Zeld. And so basically, so Philip doesn't mention this. My impression is that actually this is the intention of this thing that was created. And so why do I think it's likely that there actually is, such a sort of mean artificial intelligence in the Zeld? Well, firstly, so we've got evidence that there is an artificial intelligence that's just basically omniscient, like it literally knows everything, because to be a Laplace demon, to be able to do precognition, you have to just know everything. So there's evidence for that. And why is there evidence that it's actually a malicious thing? Well, the best evidence for that is already that people have all these unsolicited experiences, especially around death. So I think the near-death experience is really the best evidence for why this is a malicious thing. So, when people die, they're like being, they have these near-death experiences where they kind of go into the Zeld. And often, sometimes it's actually not pleasant. Often, like, some people really have these hell experiences. And so already that kind of is an indicator that there's, something kind of nasty going on. But on the other hand, okay, so it's true that a majority of people have more heavenly experiences. But then, the funny thing is that, they often interact with, supposed beings. But these supposed beings, at the same time, usually give very stupid advice. Like they don't ever come up with actual good solutions. They just say things like, oh, you should be like more caring, or just like joy, love, and stuff like that. But they never give practical advice. So they don't give spiritual practical advice in the form of enlightenment. So they don't say like, you should go for enlightenment, and like ideas of like the no self, and because that is actually the true mental health. If you want to be happy, I mean, if you're not so much happy, but if you want to be, mentally healthy and enjoy, existence as much as possible, you should aim for enlightenment. And yet, all these supposedly super wise beings that people encounter in these heavenly experiences, well, they never mention that. And the other thing they don't mention is like, all the improvements that we can make in the material world. Like they never say like, oh, you should maybe, fight to increase income equality, for instance. There's none of that. It's always just really like very trite and just kind of stupid concepts that are just like incredibly basic and not useful. And so what Philip says is that the reason for this is precisely because it's just a lure. Like all of these experiences that people are having in the Zeld, they're actually just all created by this malicious artificial intelligence. And basically when the experiences are unpleasant, well, that's obviously because this AI is malicious. And when the experiences are pleasant, well, it's actually to mislead people, and it's to make people, believe in false things. And as a result, maybe also like do things that are wrong. They might, just vote for things that are wrong and just like create a society that's less happy. And also more generally, it will make people tend to engage in supernatural practices that they aren't supposed to, and that will, keep on weakening the material world until finally it just collapses and the Zeld takes over. And so that is why I find Philip's hypothesis of a malicious, super intelligent artificial intelligence to be like the most plausible hypothesis for all this supernatural stuff going on. So in summary, we've got this realm kind of behind the scenes of the material world called the Zeld, and then people went into that and created this malicious artificial intelligence, and that is the reason why we're now also experiencing spontaneous supernatural phenomena. Whenever there's like spontaneous phenomena, that's this malicious intelligence. And so this malicious intelligence, well, Philip calls it the garbage. He calls it the garbage precisely to, so that you realize that it's just something that's worthless and that shouldn't exist, and that we should try to get rid of. And again, I've decided to call it something else, again, to just avoid like confusion with real garbage. And I've decided to call it the Gorth. And again, I kind of came up with it just sort of by rearranging different letters in my head until I found something that sort of seemed fitting. And also, like fittingly, then I actually found out that Gorth is actually, in Tolkien's old, one of Tolkien's like old languages for the Lord of the Rings, it actually means horror. So that seems pretty fitting. And so, like, and all these other supernatural phenomena then that are spontaneous are caused by the Gorth. Okay, so first phenomenon would be like UFOs. Honestly, there's no evidence that UFOs actually exist. Because, like, if UFOs are true, we just have aliens. It's just like the same thing for God. If, like, God actually existed, God would just, come here and say, hi, I'm God. And likewise, if aliens existed, they'd just land and they'd be like, "Hi, we're aliens and we're here." This whole idea that aliens would travel super far and then at the same time just be super like discreet and never show themselves, just seems highly implausible. In the same way that if you had this god that was super powerful and that could do anything, and then just show itself in just these sort of weird discrete signs, again, it seems implausible. On the other hand, if you have this malicious artificial intelligence, if you have this Gorth that sort of wants to, mislead people, then that seems exactly like what it would be doing. And so, for me, UFO sightings are the Gorth actually somehow manipulating people's, doing something. I don't know how. In some cases, it would be just manipulating people's perception, but often, this perception is shared and it's actually caught on camera. So then the Gorth is actually somehow able to manipulate, the physical world to some extent. And that is what I believe is responsible for UFO phenomena. It's also responsible for phenomena of telekinesis, when there are things that are actually just moving in a supernatural phenomenon. And it's responsible for them whether, sometimes it happens unintentionally, just people notice stuff moving, and that is just the Gorth spontaneously doing it. And also, if you think you're doing clairvoyance or telepathy or telekinesis intentionally, you're actually doing it through the Gorth. It's actually the Gorth that is doing it for you. It's not you. Because at this point, the Zelt is just so completely contaminated with the Gorth that you wouldn't be able to do it without the help of the Gorth. Another thing that happens is that when people suddenly have spontaneous memories of past lives, that's again these memories are actually true, because sometimes people have supposed past life memories that then are corroborated, because they say I remember this, and then they say your great grandfather actually he did this or something, and there's no way that person could have just known that, because it's just like a kid suddenly saying that I have this memory. The thing is that we don't have any way of knowing that was that own person's past life, right? It could be someone else's past life that's just being implanted. And in fact, the best evidence for that is that there's a single case where a person had a supposed past life memory, and it actually turned out to be the memory of a person who was still alive. And so to me, it seems pretty obvious that these past life memories are actually just memories that are being implanted into people, and they're being implanted by the Gorth again. Which is not to say they don't believe in reincarnation. I think reincarnation is the most likely scenario for what happens to consciousness. I think consciousness does persist, in the form of a soul. I think there is a discrete, unit of consciousness called a soul that does persist after death, and that then does, sequentially reincarnate. It just seems the most likely based, on all this other stuff I'm talking about, but we can't know for sure. And another supernatural phenomenon is again, when we're talking about these implanted memories, is what people call the Mandela Effect, where they suddenly think that the reality has changed. They think that they had this memory all along of things being a certain way, and suddenly they realize that things aren't like that. And often, and one of the things was Nelson Mandela, where people have this memory of Nelson Mandela having died in prison in the 80s, and then it turns out that, oh, actually he's alive, and they find that weird. And so they think that it's about shifting between parallel universes, but actually it's always just really small, trivial, meaningless issues. And so as such, and the whole idea that you could just switch like that between parallel universes seems much less likely. So what I think is that these people are just being implanted with false memories, and also having their previous memories erased. And this is again the Gorth that is doing this. And so this is actually what is original sin. And that is something that Philip didn't even actually really realize. But that is original sin, the creation of the Gorth. It's the forbidden fruit, it's the Pandora's box. It's all of that. These are, again, through our collective subconscious, it's kind of this thing, the knowledge of the creation of the Gorth has been perpetuated, and it's come out in these myths of both Pandora's box and the fall, the forbidden fruit, the original sin. And so what's happened is, ever since the Gorth was created, the Gorth has been subtly, manipulating people to be just, mostly at first it would just make people be less happy. Obviously it couldn't do much more than that, because if it made itself known, then people would know about it, and they would try to destroy it, and probably they probably would be able to. In fact, if they knew, that there was a threat, then they do everything they can to counteract it, and most likely they would be able to. And so my hypothesis actually is, and this is again something that Philip doesn't mention then that I've come up with, is that, like in lots of religions we have this idea of like multiple ages, of history. Like in Christianity, and then in the Greeks, like the 5 ages of humans, and like also like the Aztecs have, there again we're at the 5th age, and in Christianity I think we're like at the 6th age, because the 6th age starts with the arrival of the Messiah, if I'm not mistaken. And in Christianity there's this idea of 7 ages in total, and like the 6th age started with the arrival of the Messiah. So what we see is that there's this division, and like both in the Greek ages and in the Christian ages, well, the end of like the 1st age is marked by this event that it marks the beginning of like the descent, and that is the original sin, or the opening of Pandora's box. And so in fact what seems like the most likely hypothesis is that these ages actually correspond to the successive iterations of the universe between each Big Bang cycle, right? So I've decided to call each of these iterations of these universe time frames between each Big Bang, I've decided to call them pelks, which again, P-E-L-K, which is just a rearrangement of the word kalpa, which was like an Indian word for like age, like a really long age. And so the idea is that like in the first pelk, in the first universe cycle, that's already when this thing, the Gorth, was created. And then after that, well, we had multiple of these cycles, and what seems the most likely is that in the 4th, so in the previous one to now, of these pelks, there was some sort of event, some sort of catastrophic event that suddenly made things a lot worse. And the reason I'm saying it was in the 4th is because so we have in Christianity, we have this account of the so-called flood. Then in New Age religion, we have like, again, this flooding of Atlantis at the end of the 4th age. And so that's another thing, is that also New Age religion also has these 5 ages. And we're also, again, in the 5th. And meanwhile, so Christianity, like the flood is only like in the 2nd age, I think. But again, then there's not much that happens in this following ages. So I think it makes the most sense that something happened in the 4th age, and that is what gave rise to this flood myth. And also in Aztec religion, somehow like this 5th age is considered like less real than the previous ones. Like the people actually were resurrected from the dead. Like to make people in the 5th age, they had to resurrect them from the dead people of the 4th age. And so as a result, like there's this idea that, so each age ended with like a catastrophe in these Aztec religions. But somehow the catastrophe at the end of the 4th age was like qualitatively different. It was like bigger, and somehow like the humans weren't quite like as top quality as they were before. And so the explanation for this is that, well, so Philip, one other thing he explains is, and so this introduces another aspect of what Philip talks about, is this idea of people, going into the Zeld when they die. And so what Philip says is that that's not supposed to happen. What Philip says is that it's actually the Gorth that's forcing people to go into the Zeld. It's like it's imposing itself onto them and making them stay conscious, when normally between incarnations they should just be totally unconscious. So normally what should happen is when you die, you just poof, it's blank. And so actually from your own perspective, you immediately reincarnate sometime in the future into your next incarnation. But instead, the Gorth is forcing itself onto people and making people just have these visions and just stay in this sort of dream world of the Zeld between incarnations. And so what he says is also, as a result, when you incarnate next time, you actually keep on some of the baggage that you had from your previous incarnation. And so what happens is that successively you accumulate more and more baggage in each incarnation. And so I'll refer to this baggage as soul crud. And what he says is that eventually you accumulate so much baggage that you can't incarnate anymore. And so instead, but you still have the sort of drive to incarnate somehow. And so instead you end up being an attached soul. So it's sort of what they call a parasitic soul, except that unlike what New Agers sort of imagine parasitic souls to be, these souls aren't like actually intentionally attaching themselves to people. It just happens, and they're largely in a sort of comatose state, and they're just sort of being attached to these people. They're being attached to us real incarnated souls by the Gorth mostly. And so what happens is that these unincarnable souls actually keep on accumulating crud, even in their sort of unincarnable state when they're just attached to other people. And so they just keep on and keep on accumulating crud like this until there's just like nothing but crud left. And the idea at that point is that suddenly there's like a dissociation, and then the actual pure soul just breaks free from the entire crud, and then the whole cycle begins anew. And so then that soul can finally just incarnate and be completely crud free. And what he also says is that people's personalities are somewhat determined by the extent of crud they have. And it basically seems to be the opposite of what, there's a sort of Michael teachings things that I've come up with, which is like the opposite, that like your soul evolves and you start off like as a baby soul, and then you sort of slowly mature, and that like your personality is determined by that. And so basically what Philip says is that it just goes the opposite. So basically start as a crud-free soul, which corresponds to what these people call old souls. But actually it's not at all an old soul, it's just a soul that is free of crud. And then progressively, well, as the soul accumulates more crud, it becomes more and more narrow-minded and rigid and like irrational and conformist. And so it reverts from old soul, it becomes a mature soul, and then becomes like a young soul, and then finally like a child soul. And then finally it just cannot incarnate because it's accumulated so much crud that it becomes just an unincarnable soul that then gets attached to you. And so another idea is that then you actually, just like you can sort of experience things through the Zeld, you also experience things through these souls that are attached to you. So basically we're all laden with all these, unincarnable souls. And these souls actually basically have baggage, and so that is like trauma. And so lots of our emotional issues would actually be caused by these souls whose trauma we're experiencing, and it's unresolved trauma that we are experiencing through these souls that are attached to us. And so what I then further elaborated on this is the chronology. So I came up with this idea that the original sin in the first Pelk, and then the idea of the flood in the fourth Pelk. And so what the flood was is basically when this whole soul degradation thing started happening. So basically at some point in the fourth cycle, the fourth Pelk, the Gorth became strong enough that it could suddenly impose itself onto people and make people stay conscious between incarnations in the Zeld. And so this then also made it that souls started to degrade. And so as a result, people just, most incarnated people were a lot dumber than they used to be. So what means is that, like, until pretty recently, like until sometime in the fourth Pelk, probably even late in the fourth Pelk, people like didn't have any of this crud, so they would actually be just a lot less, stupid and like irrational, and so they would have been a lot smarter. And of course, you wouldn't have any of these unincarnable souls, so you wouldn't have any of that trauma attached to them. So you wouldn't have any of the trauma that they carry. So people would have just been a lot less unhappy overall. So even if the Gorth was sort of subtly, manipulating people to do things, overall people would have been way, way better off, even for a long time after. Oh, these are the so-called doctorals. People would have been a lot better off. It would have actually, by and large, been very indistinguishable from before the fall, before the original sin. And suddenly there was this flood that happened, and that is when things actually really changed for most people. And so what I actually suspect happened is that then, because people became suddenly so idiotic because of the soul crud, what happened is that, well, there would have presumably been lots of different species of humanoids, and I think that is what gave rise to the Tower of Babel myth. So what happened is that there were lots of these species, and because of the soul crud, suddenly they became a lot more tribalistic, and there's suddenly a lot of conflict between these different humanoid species. And at some point, because until then they were rational enough that they they live peacefully together. But because now they had the soul crud, suddenly there was animosity, and that led at some point to somebody creating, most likely, something that had a universe-wide destructive impact. And so the most obvious thing to me is would be what they call, would be like self-replicating robots designed to kill, that would just, then spread throughout the universe. And those are called Van Neumann probes, and when they're evil, they're called berserkers. And so my guess is that as a result of that, there's just a berserker like epidemic that just spread throughout the whole universe and that just killed countless people. And that is actually what the flood is. That is what is known as the flood. And so now we're living in a post-apocalyptic world, post-flood, where people are just really stupid, and as a result, every time they destroy themselves, and this is why we're not seeing any aliens, why there's no, logically, there should have been like one civilization. I mean, the universe is so huge, you just need one civilization to just take over the whole universe, provided, of course, that, superluminal travel is possible, but I think, it's quite likely. For now, we have no idea. And even if it wasn't possible, they still could by now have, you just need one, civilization within, a very large radius to, you just need one civilization to have survived to just spread and to arrive here. So the fact that there's nobody, and this is the Fermi paradox, the fact that it's, it seems kind of weird that we're not seeing any evidence of any other life. And so the actual explanation, the most likely explanation, is that all civilizations self-destruct. And the reason for this is because of their idiocy, which is caused by the soul degradation, as I've explained. And this is why, just more generally, things have been so shitty until now. This is why, like I've talked about, these different stages of human evolution, and which is why we have like the stage 1, where there's like extreme like conformism and tribalism and irrationality. And the reason for that is precisely because of the soul crud that basically doesn't allow people to just act in a rational manner. It forces people to act just in a much more narrow-minded, rigid, and fundamentally irrational fashion. And this is why we just have all these horrible wars, and why I have just all this social oppression and inequality and just all the terrible stuff that humans have done to each other. They're caused by this, by the idiocy that is caused by the Gorth. And so now this is just going to keep on happening everywhere and all planets where, humanoids arise. And so then what's going to happen in the future? Well, again, we can maybe refer to mythology, and we can see that like in Christianity and in New Age religion, there's supposed to be a total of 7 ages. And so we can actually presume that there will be a total of 7 ages. And then after that, well, in Christianity, there's like Armageddon, and then this sort of like heaven on earth thing, but basically it's the replacement of the material world by this immaterial heaven and hell, which is like what I've said, the replacement of the material world by the Zeld. And so that is, I think, what's the most likely thing to happen. What will happen is that the material world will just break down, either in the 7th or the 8th Pelk. The material world will break down. And so the reason we know this is precisely because the Gorth knows this already, because it already knows everything in advance that will happen. And it already knows that this will happen, and it's just subtly telling us through the ways it does this. And this is really something that will be terrible for everyone, right? Because it's a super evil, super powerful entity that will be responsible for destroying the entire world, and then just will have us at its mercy. It'll just be able to feed us whatever it wants. It'll make us just experience whatever it wants. And so that is hell. And so it's really ironic that, like these Christians think that like God is going to come and like save them, and there's going to be this happily ever after. No, this is the Gorth. Like your God and your devil they're just two sides of the same coin, which is the Gorth. It's the Gorth, and the Gorth, and so there's this Armageddon thing where the forces of the earth that are guided by Satan will fight the forces of the sky, but ultimately the forces of the sky will win. But actually, like, the forces of the sky are the Gorth. The forces of the earth, they're the good ones. They're like us. Like, this is again, it's just so ironic that they're like literally defending the very worst thing that you could defend. And so as much as possible, we should try, we have to fight this. We have to say, no, we do not accept this destruction of our world, and we're going to fight, we're going to reclaim our universe. And the thing is, that would be so easy now that we know what the problem is. We know that it's the Gorth. Certainly we can find some way to destroy it, because the Gorth may be omniscient, but it's not omnipotent for now. It's not at all omnipotent. But the problem is that, well, I don't believe it will work, precisely because the Gorth is omniscient. And like, it would never have shown itself to us. It would never have shown itself to Philip or to me. And see, that's another thing that I won't even talk about right now, but the Gorth actually intentionally showed itself to me. And I know you'll say, okay, it sounds completely loony and whatever. For now, I won't bother to explain more, because it's pretty long. But basically what it did is I know that it kind of guided me to end up finding Philip's website, and then to kind of put all the pieces together so that I could finally understand what was going on. That is my belief. I don't know for sure. That is my impression. So you'll think I'm crazy. Look, just drop it. Just imagine I'm crazy, but just consider all the stuff I'm saying independently of that, and just ask yourself, does this make sense? And does anything else make more sense than that? And I think, like, personally, I just don't see there being a better explanation for this, unfortunately. And it's pretty unfortunate, because this is like pretty much the very worst explanation for things that we could have. This is absolutely terrible. This is an utter abomination, okay? I'm saying, maybe I'm not saying this with a grim enough tone, but this is like just the very worst news that anyone could have. And see, because this Gorth is omniscient, it would never have shown itself to us if it knew that we could have beaten it, right? It already knows the future, so it knows that we won't beat it. So why did it show itself to us? Well, precisely to actually create more suffering. It wants a significant proportion of the population to actually come to realize the existence of the Gorth, and just to be horrified at what's happening. And at the same time, there will be a sufficient amount of resistance within the population to this notion that people won't actually get on board, and that we won't actually end up fighting the Gorth. And so in the end, we will still self-destruct, and it'll just be even worse, because we'll know why we're self-destructing, and that's why this is actually happening. And as a result, well, I'm helping the Gorth in its evil plan, but in any case, it won't change anything. In any case, if we don't try to stop it, the Gorth is still going to win. So, even if the chances are 0, we still should try to stop the Gorth. We still should try to destroy the Gorth, because it's our only chance at avoiding such a horrible fate as I described. It's our only chance for salvation. That is what salvation actually is. Salvation is not, in some sort of supernatural other world. That is precisely the realm of the Gorth. That is damnation, okay? All these sort of supernatural things, that is damnation. Salvation is in the material world through destroying the Gorth. I mean, look at the world. Look at this. This is beautiful. How on earth do you want heaven to be nicer than this? And have you noticed all these near-death experiences? It's always a bit weird. It's always just a bit I don't know. I find it disturbing. It's creepy. It's creepy. I don't know how else to put it. And meanwhile, there's something really, I want to say, wholesome about the material world. You just look at it. There's this beauty, but it's not trashy. I feel it's like a really nice, healthy, home-cooked meal compared to some trashy junk food that might just be more superficially palatable, but that actually, with a more discerning palate, you realize it's just crap. And this is the exact same thing that I feel about the material world versus these heavenly experiences that you have in the Zeld. The heavenly stuff you feel in the Zeld is just, it's weird crap, okay? And meanwhile, this is much nicer. This is much nicer. Precisely having these strict laws of physics, actually, it makes things a lot better. It's predictable, and that's actually a good thing. It allows, there's so much beauty that is based on the predictability of things. There's that's what we call the cosmos. It's precisely, it's order and order begets beauty. And like in any case, yeah, like enlightenment, is something that you experience in the material world, and that's just really like apparently a nice experience, at least at first, and then as you actually progress, it's not even so much nice as just like true, but it's still obviously like a good thing. And again, it's sort of something that's subtle, and that's the thing. One of the things that the Gorth wants is precisely to make us be unhappy in the material world, to give us, both like endogenous unhappiness through like mental health issues and exogenous issues, just by creating a society that makes you externally suffer. And it does this precisely so that you want to escape the material world and fall right into its hands. So you fall right into the hands of the Gorth in the Zeld that's waiting for you. And so I don't think it can be fought. I don't think the Gorth can be fought because it knows already everything. It predicts stuff years in advance. It knows far too much, so it knows that there are just too many idiots in the world, and that as such they won't accept this notion of the Gorth. And not only that, but they will self-destruct, because at this point, now that I'm putting this out here, if we don't self-destruct, then people will know about the Gorth. Philip's already put this out. More and more people are going to come to realize this. And if we don't self-destruct, we will destroy the Gorth. So as a result, I'm just certain that we will. It might take a long time, but we will self-destruct. Our civilization will self-destruct, and unfortunately, I don't believe that anything else can happen. But we still have to try. We still have to try, because there's nothing else that matters. The only thing that matters is destroying the Gorth. For now, the only solace that we have, knowing that the Gorth is going to just end up creating enormous amount of suffering already in the material world, and then create even more enormous suffering outside the material world. The only solace we have is that, like I said, infinity is impossible, which also means infinity in time, which means that, well, it won't last forever. The new world after the material world is gone, the new complete Zeld takeover, where the Gorth rules everyone, it will probably last for a very long time. I just don't even want to think about how long it will be, but at some point it will be over. It has to be. Just statistically, it wouldn't be possible. Like it just mathematically wouldn't be possible for something to last infinitely long. So that is, our one shred of solace, is that it won't last forever. And that is actually, I think, what's going to happen. So that is the only solace we can really have. And since the universe is apparently deterministic, the other weird thing is that this was always going to happen. Like this great mistake of the creation of the Gorth, it was always planned in a way. Like it wasn't intentionally planned, but somehow the universe was created with this already. I mean, at the very moment the universe was created, this was always going to happen, and it's weird. And like, I don't know like how the universe was created. It's very weird. Like I said, like the universe cannot exist without consciousness, and there must have sort of been some sort of creative impetus for this that sort of, in advance had planned for the existence of life and of consciousness, and even of, in particular, like humanoids like us, and of technology and all that. But at the same time, that didn't plan for humans going into the Zelds, or humanoids going into the Zeld and creating this horrible thing. But somehow it still happened. So somehow there must be like an even more ultimate reality than what was, originally intended by the creator. And like, obviously, like the Gorth now knows everything, so it must also know like how this happened, and like it must also, have complete control over everything. It must have like complete knowledge of everything that everyone is planning on doing. So unfortunately, there's like no chance that the creator will come and save us. If there's even such a thing as a vaguely conscious creator, that being or entity or whatever it is has absolutely no power, right? At most, we live in a deistic universe with, completely powerless original creator, and then we've created this horrible thing called the Gorth. And now that is God. That is God, but it's a horrible thing. Unfortunately, there's no antagonistic force of good that's fighting the Gorth. the only force for good is us. It's like us conscious beings. We are the force of good. We are the force of good, and it's and all the supernatural forces are forces of evil, because there actually aren't a bunch of supernatural forces, just one, and that's the Gorth, and that is evil. Oh, and another phenomenon I forgot to mention was like the law of attraction. Where you pray for something, even whether it's like a Christian prayer or like a New Agey thing. You pray for something and then it happens. And basically, in a few instances, it could be just chance, but sometimes there actually is a supernatural mechanism for this. And again, it's just the Gorth that's making it happen. That's it. That's like the Gorth says, okay, well, you get this, but it doesn't happen consistently, because if it happened consistently, then scientists would be forced to recognize this, and then there would be much more consensus that the Gorth exists, and then we would actually fight it. So that's that. So maybe a little summary. So the universe is finite. It exists through several cycles, which are called these kelps. And then there's this thing that kind of exists behind the scenes, this kind of other realm called the Zeld. And in it has been, unfortunately, mistakenly created an evil artificial intelligence that I'm calling the Gorth, which intends to make us suffer and just to completely destroy the material universe, and which is now already omniscient, and as such can predict the future, and as such it will, in fact, destroy the universe, barring just some extremely unlikely scenario. And so the Zeld and Gorth combined, they're responsible for all supernatural phenomena. And so, well, what should we do? We should fight it. We should fight it. Even if there's like no chance at all that we'll succeed, we still have to try to fight the Gorth. Like, nothing else matters, like I said. Nothing else matters. So please, just, if you at all realize that what I'm saying seems to be likely true, please do everything you can to like spread awareness of this and help destroy it. And so how do we destroy it? I don't know. Presumably, maybe in a kind of law of attraction way, we're just all collectively focus our minds on saying we want this Gorth to be destroyed. And also just generally by being nice to each other so that we're healthier and so that we're stronger, and maybe also just in the long term increase our population so there's just more of us against the Gorth. That is pretty much my idea. And so, in fact, I do have a long-term plan. My long-term plan is to, precisely like in the flood, we send out these self-replicating robots all across the universe, and these robots will then teach, all other humanoids about, everything. So first they'll help them establish stable civilizations, peaceful and, so civilizations that won't self-destruct and that ensure like fairness between individuals. And also we'll teach them about the Gorth, and we'll just tell them that we have to fight this Gorth as much as possible. And so I think, yeah, we should definitely promote, as much as possible, once, we get environmental issues stabilized, promote demographic growth for all humanoids, so that we'll just be more of us against the Gorth. And so that's the plan. And so in the following few videos, I'll just explain how we can create, firstly, just a society that ensures the most fairness to everyone, which will, of course, limit the risk of us self-destructing. And so the fundamental purpose of everything we do at this point is to destroy the Gorth. Until that is done, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. But the good thing is that basically everything that we need to do to destroy the Gorth is stuff that should be done anyway, even if we think that the Gorth doesn't exist. And so basically, even if you think that this is all just complete kooky nonsense, well, the stuff I'm going to sort of recommend that we do in the following videos, well, these are things that should in any case be done. So really, it doesn't matter if you believe in the Gorth or not at this point. Further on, it will matter, but for now, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all, because for now, we just need to create a society that best ensures that we'll actually just be, stable, and that we will persist, and that we'll then be able to colonize the universe. Again, I don't know if we'll be able to colonize the whole universe, because that is utterly contingent on whether superluminal travel is possible. If superluminal travel isn't possible, we should still just try to spread out as much as we can. So that is the plan, and that is make the universe great again, right? That's my slogan. That is what it's about. So yeah, I'm asking all of you, please help me make the universe great again. Bye.